Hey there, Reddit explorers. Before we dive into today's shocking story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss any of these jaw-dropping tales. If you enjoy the video, smash that like button, it really helps the channel grow. I never thought I'd be writing this, but some stories need to be told, even if they tear you apart inside. My name is Michael, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. A decent job as a software engineer, a beautiful girlfriend named Elise who I'd been with for 3 years, and a relatively good relationship with my father after my mother passed away 5 years ago. How naive I was. Elise and I met during college. She was studying psychology, and I was finishing my computer science degree. We hit it off immediately. Her quick wit matched my dry humor, and there was this electricity between us I'd never felt with anyone else. She had these captivating blue eyes that seemed to change shade depending on her mood, and wavy brown hair that always smelled like lavender. After graduation, it felt natural when she moved into my apartment. My father, James, had been alone since my mother died from cancer. He'd thrown himself into his work as a real estate developer, and our relationship had grown distant. I made efforts to bridge that gap, inviting him to dinner once a month, calling regularly. When Elise suggested we invite him more often, I was touched by her thoughtfulness. She said everyone deserved family connections, and she wanted to help repair ours. "Your dad seems lonely, Michael," she said one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. "Maybe we should invite him over more often. I don't mind cooking for 3." I remember feeling a wave of appreciation wash over me. "That's really sweet of you," I told her, kissing her forehead. "I think he'd like that." So began our new tradition of weekly family dinners. Dad would come over every Thursday, bringing wine or dessert. I noticed he seemed happier, more engaged. He and Elise got along surprisingly well. They shared an interest in true crime documentaries and often recommended books to each other. I was grateful for her effort to connect with him. Sometimes they'd have entire conversations about topics I had little interest in, and I'd just sit back and smile, happy that 2 of the most important people in my life were bonding. Around 6 months into these dinners, Dad surprised us by inviting us to his company's annual charity gala. It was a black tie event to raise money for cancer research, a cause dear to him since Mom's death. Elise was particularly excited, rushing out to buy a new dress for the occasion. I remember how stunning she looked that night in a sleek black gown, her hair swept up elegantly. "You look beautiful," I told her as we got ready. "Thanks, babe. I want to make a good impression with your dad's colleagues," she replied, applying her lipstick carefully. The night of the gala was magical. Dad's company had rented out the ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel. Everything sparkled, the chandeliers, the silverware, the jewelry adorning the guests. Dad seemed proud to introduce us to everyone. I noticed how his hand occasionally rested on Elise's back as he guided her through the crowd, but I thought nothing of it. He was being polite, gentlemanly. During dinner, Dad gave a moving speech about Mom and the importance of cancer research. I saw tears in Elise's eyes as she listened. Her empathy was one of the things I loved most about her. After the formal part of the evening ended, the band started playing and people moved to the dance floor. "Would you mind if I asked Elise for a dance?" Dad asked me. "Your mother and I used to love this song." "Of course not," I said, smiling. "I'm going to grab another drink anyway." I watched them from the bar, my father, still handsome at 58, and my beautiful girlfriend swaying to the music. They seemed to be deep in conversation, and at one point Elise threw her head back in laughter at something he said. I felt a twinge of something, not quite jealousy, just an odd sensation I couldn't name. But I brushed it off. This was good. My girlfriend and my father were getting along. Many people weren't so lucky. The drive home was quiet. Elise seemed lost in thought, and I assumed she was tired from the evening. "Did you have a good time?" I asked. "Oh yes, it was lovely." "Your dad's friends are nice." She stared out the window. "James really misses your mom, doesn't he?" I noticed her use of my father's first name but didn't comment on it. "Yeah, I think he does. Tonight probably brought up a lot of memories." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're a good son, Michael." Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle shifts in our routine after that night. Elise started suggesting we go to Dad's house, sometimes instead of him always coming to our apartment. She said it would be easier for him, and we could see the renovations he'd been talking about. It made sense, so I agreed. Then came the occasional texts from Dad asking about Elise, if she'd enjoyed a book he'd lent her, or if she'd watched a documentary they'd discussed. Again, I saw nothing suspicious. I was happy they were forming a relationship independent of me. When Elise started a new job at a therapy practice, her schedule became more erratic. Sometimes she'd have evening appointments with clients or weekend workshops. I supported her career completely and never questioned when she'd come home late, smelling of perfume and slightly disheveled, explaining she'd gone for drinks with colleagues after work. I trusted her implicitly. Dad, too, seemed busier than usual with work. Our weekly dinners sometimes got canceled because of his last-minute meetings or business trips. When we did get together, though, the conversation flowed easily among the three of us, and I never felt like a third wheel. Not really. The first crack in my blissful ignorance appeared about 4 months ago. Elise and I shared a cloud storage account where we kept photos, important documents, and backups of our phones. One evening, while she was at one of her late appointments, I needed to find the warranty information for our refrigerator, which had started making an odd noise. As I browsed through our shared folders, I noticed one titled simply E. I didn't recognize it, so curiosity got the better of me. When I clicked on it, my stomach dropped. Inside were dozens of photos, selfies of Elise I'd never seen before. In some, she was in lingerie I didn't recognize. In others, she was blowing kisses at the camera or posing suggestively. These weren't photos she'd ever sent to me. My heart pounded as I scrolled through them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Who were these for? There were no explicit messages accompanying the photos, no evidence of who the recipient might be. I sat there staring at my screen, feeling sick. Was she cheating on me? With whom? I wanted to confront her immediately, but decided to wait and see if I could gather more information. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe these were just for her own confidence, or from before we were together, and she'd saved them accidentally when backing up her phone. I closed the folder and tried to put it out of my mind. But over the next few weeks, I found myself paying closer attention to Elise's behavior. How often was she really working late? How many weekend workshops did a therapist need to attend? One Saturday morning, while Elise was supposedly at a trauma therapy certification workshop, I received a text from Dad asking if we wanted to come over for dinner that night. I replied that I'd love to, but Elise was at a workshop all day. His response chilled me. No, she's not. We had to cancel it. She didn't tell you. My fingers hovered over the phone. What did he mean, we? Why would he know about her workshop? I replied casually. Must have slipped her mind. Where is she then? Oh, I thought she'd be with you. Maybe she made other plans. I called Elise immediately, but she didn't pick up. When she finally called back an hour later, she sounded rushed. Hey, what's up? She asked, ambient noise in the background suggesting she was outdoors or in a public place. Just wondering how the workshop is going, I said, keeping my voice neutral. A pause. It's good, intensive, but I'm learning a lot. That's strange because Dad just texted me saying it was canceled. Another longer pause. Oh, yeah, the main session was canceled, but they're still running some smaller breakout groups. I should have updated you, sorry. It sounded plausible, but something felt off. Where are you now? It's pretty noisy. We're on a lunch break. I'm at that cafe near the conference center. She cleared her throat. Listen, I should get back. I'll tell you all about it tonight, okay? Love you. She hung up before I could respond. That evening, when she came home, I watched her carefully as she recounted details of the workshop. She seemed to have every answer prepared, discussing specific techniques they'd covered and people she'd met. Either she was telling the truth, or she was an exceptional liar. I wanted desperately to believe it was the former, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I found myself checking her phone when she was in the shower, looking through her emails when she left her laptop open. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then one night, as we were getting ready for bed, Elise's phone pinged with a message. She was brushing her teeth, so I glanced at the screen out of habit. The notification showed a message from James. I can't stop thinking about today. Same time tomorrow. My father's message to my girlfriend. My hands shook as I set the phone down exactly as I'd found it. I felt physically ill. What had happened today? What was happening tomorrow? I lay down and pretended to be asleep when Elise came to bed, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. The next morning, I casually asked Elise about her plans for the day. Just work until 6, then I might meet Sarah for a quick drink, she said, referencing a friend from her office. Cool. Maybe I'll see if Dad wants to grab dinner then, I suggested, watching her reaction carefully. She froze for just a microsecond before continuing to butter her toast. Oh, I think he mentioned something about a business dinner tonight when we were texting about that book he lent me. He did, I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Yeah, something about potential investors. She didn't meet my eyes as she took a bite of toast. I nodded and changed the subject, but inside I was screaming. She had just lied to my face. Dad hadn't mentioned any business dinner to me, and now I was certain something was happening between them. That day at work, I couldn't concentrate. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concerns with vague excuses about not sleeping well. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and tried to decide what to do. Should I confront them, follow one of them? The thought of spying on my girlfriend and my father made me feel dirty, but the alternative, continuing to be deceived, seemed worse. In the end, I decided to set a trap. I texted Elise that I'd be working late and wouldn't be home until around 9. Then I texted Dad saying I had to cancel our fictional dinner plans because of work. Both responded with appropriate disappointment. At 6:30 p.m., I parked down the street from our apartment, where I could see both the entrance to our building and the visitor parking area. At 7:15, my father's silver Audi pulled into a spot. I sank lower in my seat, watching as he got out, straightened his jacket, and walked into our building with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to rush in there to catch them in the act, but something held me back. Maybe they really were just talking about books or watching documentaries. Maybe I was being paranoid. I needed definitive proof before I destroyed both relationships. I sat in my car for another hour, feeling increasingly foolish. What was I doing, spying like this? Just as I was about to start the engine and leave, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from our home security system, the one I'd installed after a break-in at a neighboring apartment last year. The notification showed motion detected in the kitchen. We had a small camera there, positioned to view the entrance and part of the living room, mainly to check if packages had been delivered when we weren't home. I hesitated, then opened the app. The image loaded and my world collapsed. There on our kitchen counter, the same counter where we prepared meals together, where we sometimes ate breakfast when we were in a hurry, were my girlfriend and my father, locked in a passionate embrace. Elise's legs were wrapped around his waist, her head thrown back as he kissed her neck. His hands were places a father's hands should never be on his son's girlfriend. I closed the app, feeling like I might vomit. The betrayal was too much to process all at once. I sat there, trembling, unsure what to do next. Part of me wanted to burst into the apartment and confront them. Another part wanted to drive away and never look back. In the end, I did neither. Instead, I methodically took screenshots of the security camera feed, saving the evidence to a separate folder on my phone. Then I turned off the engine, got out of the car, and walked calmly toward our building. As I inserted my key in the lock, I could hear them inside, low voices, a feminine laugh, the clink of wine glasses. I paused, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Elise was perched on a bar stool at the kitchen island, her lipstick smudged. Dad stood by the refrigerator, wine bottle in hand, his collar askew. The look of sheer panic on their faces would have been comical in any other circumstance. "Michael," Elise's voice was too high, "you're home early." "Meeting finished sooner than expected," I replied, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. I set my bag down and looked between them. "Don't let me interrupt whatever's going on here." Dad attempted recovery first. "Just stopped by to drop off that book we discussed." He gestured vaguely toward the coffee table where indeed a book lay. They'd planned this alibi. Interesting, I said, moving to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of the wine they'd been enjoying. Must be quite a book to have you both so flushed. Elise slid off the bar stool, smoothing her skirt. How was work? You should have texted that you'd be home early. Like you texted that you were meeting Sarah, or like Dad texted that he had a business dinner. I took a long sip of wine, watching their expressions shift from panic to realization. Interesting how both of those plans changed. Dad set the wine bottle down, his hand trembling slightly. Michael, I think we should talk. Yes, I agreed, too calmly. Let's talk about how long my father and my girlfriend have been fucking behind my back. Elise flinched at my language. It's not, we didn't, please, I cut her off. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it. I saw you, both of you, on our kitchen counter. I pulled out my phone, showing them the screenshot I'd taken from the security camera. Quite passionate for a book club discussion. The color drained from both their faces. Dad stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. Son, this isn't how we wanted you to find out. We were going to tell you. Tell me what, exactly? I demanded, my composure finally cracking. That while I've been working 60-hour weeks to build a future with Elise, she's been building one with you instead. That all those late-night therapy sessions and weekend workshops were just excuses to be with my father. Please enlighten me. Elise was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Michael, it just happened. We never meant to hurt you. It just happened, I echoed incredulously. Affairs don't just happen, Elise. They require planning, deception, hundreds of deliberate choices to betray someone who trusts you. I turned to my father, rage building. And you, my own father, the man who taught me about respect and honor. What a joke. Did you think about Mom while you were seducing my girlfriend? Or was that part of the thrill? Dad winced as if I'd struck him. Don't bring your mother into this, he said quietly. This has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with her, I shouted. She would be disgusted by you both. Michael, please, Elise pleaded, reaching for me. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. We didn't plan this. We developed feelings for each other over time. It started after the gala. I don't care when it started, I interrupted. I care that it happened at all. I care that the two people I trusted most in the world have been lying to my face for months. Dad sighed heavily. We were going to tell you. We were trying to figure out the right way, the right time. Is there a right way to tell your son you're sleeping with his girlfriend? I asked bitterly. Please, Dad, share your wisdom. The three of us stood in tense silence. Outside, life continued normally, cars passing, neighbors talking, someone's music playing faintly. Inside our apartment, my life was imploding. How long? I finally asked. They exchanged a look that spoke volumes. They'd discussed this, prepared for this question. 4 months, Elise admitted quietly. 4 months. While I was planning a surprise birthday party for her, while I was saving for a ring. 4 months of deceit every time she kissed me goodbye or hello, every time she lay beside me in bed, every time we shared a meal with my father. I think you should both leave, I said, suddenly exhausted. Michael, this is my home too, Elise protested. Not anymore. Dad stepped toward me. Son, let's not make hasty decisions. We should talk this through like adults. Like adults, I laughed humorlessly. Was it adult to betray your son? Was it adult to sneak around behind my back? No, I think I'm the only adult in this room right now. I walked to the door and held it open. Dad, go home. Elise, I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. Come back tomorrow when I'm at work to get your things. I'll leave boxes in the hallway. Michael, please, Elise was sobbing now. We can work through this. There is no we anymore, I said flatly. There's you and my father, and then there's me. Those are separate entities now. Dad placed his hand on Elise's shoulder. Come on, you can stay at my place tonight. The casual way he said it, as if they'd already discussed this contingency, was the final blow. They'd planned for this moment, for the fallout. They'd prepared. As they walked past me, Dad tried once more. We'll talk tomorrow when everyone's calmer. I said nothing, just closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I sank to the floor, back against the door, and finally allowed myself to feel the full force of what had happened. The tears came in waves, along with flashes of rage so intense I punched the wall beside me, leaving a dent in the drywall and bloodying my knuckles. That night, I systematically went through our apartment, gathering Elise's things. Clothes, books, toiletries, mementos, I packed them all in boxes with mechanical efficiency. When I found photos of us, I tore them in half, keeping my portions in a separate pile. Her jewelry I placed in a small box, including the necklace I'd given her for our second anniversary. The engagement ring I'd hidden in my sock drawer, a vintage sapphire that had reminded me of her eyes, I placed back in its box and shoved to the back of my closet. By morning, I'd packed up every trace of her presence except for the memories, which I couldn't so easily box away. I called in sick to work, knowing I couldn't face people yet. Then I changed all the passwords to our shared accounts, Netflix, Amazon, the cloud storage where I'd first found those photos. I transferred money from our joint savings account to my personal account, leaving her half untouched. At 9 a.m., I placed all the boxes in the hallway outside our apartment, then went for a long walk, not wanting to be home when she came to collect them. When I returned hours later, the boxes were gone. On our doormat lay her key. The next few weeks passed in a blur of pain and anger. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to fill my evenings. I told friends and colleagues that Elise and I had broken up but offered no details. Some tried to probe, sensing there was more to the story, but I shut down their questions. The humiliation of being betrayed by both my girlfriend and my father was too raw to share. Dad called and texted incessantly. At first, I ignored him completely, but as the messages piled up, I sent a simple response: "I need time, don't contact me." Elise was more persistent. She sent long emails explaining her feelings, how confused she'd been, how she'd never meant to hurt me. She described how her relationship with my father had evolved from friendship to attraction, how they'd resisted at first but eventually given in to their feelings. Reading these justifications made me physically ill. I didn't respond to any of them. About a month after the confrontation, I received an unexpected text from Dad's business partner, Robert, asking if we could meet for lunch. Curious, I agreed. Robert had been like an uncle to me growing up. He and Dad had founded their real estate development company together 20 years ago, and he had been a constant presence in our family's life. As we sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant, his discomfort was evident. "I'm sorry about what happened with your father and Elise," he said after we'd ordered. I stiffened. "He told you," Robert nodded. "He's been distracted at work." Eventually, he explained why. "I want you to know I think what they did was wrong, regardless of any feelings involved." I appreciated his directness. "Thanks, I'm dealing with it." "There's something else you should know," Robert said, looking uncomfortable. "James has made some questionable business decisions lately. He's considering selling his share of the company to finance a move." This caught me by surprise. A move where? To Boston. Apparently, Elise has been offered a position at a prestigious therapy practice there, and he's planning to go with her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. My father was willing to sell the business he'd built from the ground up, leave the city where my mother was buried, all for a woman half his age. My girlfriend. When? I managed to ask. Soon, from what I gather. The sale could go through within weeks. I nodded, processing this information. "Why are you telling me this?" Robert hesitated. "Because I think you deserve to know, and because I'm hoping you might talk to him before he makes this mistake. The company is his legacy, yours too, potentially. I don't think he's thinking clearly. You're asking me to save him from himself." After what he did, my laugh was bitter. "I'm asking you to consider what your mother would want. She was always the voice of reason in James's life. Since she's been gone," he trailed off, then continued more firmly. "Look, what they did to you was inexcusable. But throwing away decades of work for what's likely a midlife crisis, that affects more than just him." I didn't promise anything, but as I left the lunch, Robert's words echoed in my mind. Would Mom want me to let Dad destroy his life's work? Would she want our family's final fracture to be so complete? That evening, I found myself driving to my parents' house, Dad's house now. I hadn't been there in months, not since before I discovered the affair. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw lights on inside and both Dad's car and an unfamiliar compact sedan parked out front. Elise's new car, I realized. She was living there now. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage. Finally, I approached the door and rang the bell. Dad answered, his shock at seeing me evident. "Michael," he breathed, as if saying my name might scare me away. "Can I come in?" I asked stiffly. He stepped back, gesturing me inside. Of course, of course. The house looked different. Some of Mom's decorative touches had been replaced with items I recognized from our apartment. Elise's colorful throw pillows, her collection of succulents. She'd moved in completely then. As if summoned by my thoughts, Elise appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. She froze when she saw me, uncertainty written across her face. "I can go upstairs if you two need to talk," she offered quietly. "No," I said, surprising myself. "This concerns both of you." We moved to the living room, sitting awkwardly, Dad and Elise on the sofa, me in an armchair across from them. They weren't touching, at least, seeming to understand that displays of affection would be salt in my wounds. "Robert told me you're selling your share of the company," I said without preamble. "That you're moving to Boston." Dad sighed, shooting a look at Elise. "I was going to tell you once it was finalized." Why sell the business you built? Why leave Mom's grave? For what?" I demanded. "It's complicated, Michael," Dad began. "No, it's actually very simple," I cut in. "You're throwing away everything for a relationship based on betrayal." Elise flinched but said nothing. Dad leaned forward. "I know you're hurt and you have every right to be. What we did was wrong, the way we went about it, the lies, all of it. But my feelings for Elise are real and hers for me. Real enough to destroy your company, your reputation." "I'm not destroying anything," he countered. "I'm selling my share to Robert. The company will continue, and as for my reputation," he trailed off, having the grace to look ashamed. "I know what people will say, I know what they'll think. I've made my peace with that. And what about me? Have you made your peace with destroying our relationship too?" The question hung in the air between us. Dad's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "No," he said finally, his voice breaking. "That's the one thing I can't make peace with. You're my son, Michael. Despite everything, I love you." I looked away, unwilling to let him see how his words affected me. "You have a funny way of showing it." Elise spoke for the first time. "Michael, I know you probably hate me." "I don't hate you," I interrupted, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I'm angry, I'm hurt. But hatred requires energy I'm not willing to spend on either of you anymore." She nodded, accepting this. "Fair enough. But please know that we never set out to hurt you. What happened between James and me, it took us both by surprise. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late to stop it without someone getting hurt. So you chose me as the sacrifice," I observed coldly. "No one was supposed to be a sacrifice," Dad insisted. "We were going to tell you to be honest before things went too far." I laughed humorlessly. "Sex on my kitchen counter isn't too far. What was your threshold exactly?" They exchanged uncomfortable glances. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. "Look, I didn't come here to rehash what happened. I came because, despite everything, I don't want to see you destroy your life's work, Dad. The company is your legacy, Mom's too, in a way. She supported you through those early years when you were barely making ends meet." Dad stood as well, hope flaring in his eyes. "Does this mean, are we talking again?" "We're talking right now," I said carefully, "but forgiveness, reconciliation, that's a long way off if ever." "But it's a start," he persisted. I didn't confirm or deny this. Instead, I turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Don't sell the company, Dad. Whatever you and Elise decide to do, don't throw away the one thing Mom would have wanted you to keep." As I walked back to my car, I heard the door open behind me. Elise called my name, and against my better judgment, I turned. "I'm sorry," she said simply, standing on the porch steps. "I know that means nothing right now, but I am truly sorry for hurting you." I nodded once, acknowledging her words without accepting them as absolution. Then I got in my car and drove away, feeling strangely lighter than I had in months. That conversation marked a turning point, though not in the way anyone might have expected. Dad decided not to sell his share of the company, but he and Elise still moved forward with their plans to relocate to Boston. They moved 3 months later. Before they left, Dad came to see me one last time. We met at a neutral location, a park where he used to take me fishing as a child. It was awkward at first, neither of us quite knowing what to say. "I took your advice," he said eventually, "about the company. Robert and I worked out an arrangement where I'll remain a silent partner. I'll still have income from it, but he'll handle the day-to-day operations." "Good," I said simply. "It was the right decision." He nodded, looking out over the lake. "I've been thinking a lot about your mother lately, about what she would say about all this." He smiled sadly. "She'd have kicked my ass, I know that much." Despite myself, I laughed. "Yeah, she would have. I miss her every day, you know." "What happened with Elise, it doesn't change that." I tensed at her name but forced myself to remain calm. "I know." We sat in silence for a while, watching ducks glide across the water. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Michael," Dad said finally, "but I hope that someday we might find a way back to some kind of relationship. You're my only son, my only family." I thought about this, about what it would mean to cut him out of my life completely. Despite everything, the thought brought me no peace. "I can't promise anything," I told him honestly, "but I won't close the door entirely." It was the most I could offer, and he accepted it with a nod of gratitude. As for Elise, our final communication was less face-to-face. The day before she left for Boston, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a small wooden box I recognized. I'd admired it once in an antique store, but hadn't bought it because of the price. She'd gone back and purchased it for me. Inside the box was a letter and a memory card. The letter was brief, "Michael. I know you have no reason to trust me or believe anything I say, but I hope you'll read this anyway." The memory card contains all the photos from our shared cloud account, our trips, our moments together. "I've deleted my access to the account, but I wanted you to have these memories. Whatever happened between us at the end doesn't erase the good times we had. I won't ask for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that what we had was real and precious to me. The mistakes I made weren't because I didn't love you. They were because I got lost in complicated feelings I didn't know how to handle. I hope that someday you find someone worthy of your trust and love. You deserve that more than anyone I know. Goodbye, Michael." Elise, I set the letter aside, feeling empty rather than angry. The memory card I plugged into my computer, scrolling through images of happier times, Elise and me on a beach vacation, hiking in the mountains, celebrating birthdays and holidays. It was like looking at photos of strangers now, these smiling, carefree people who had no idea what lay ahead. After they left, I focused on rebuilding. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Elise. I sold our apartment and bought a small house in a different neighborhood, needing a fresh start in a place without memories lurking in every corner. 6 months after they moved, I received a text from Dad, "Thinking of you today, hope you're well." I responded with a simple "Thanks, I'm okay." It wasn't much, but it was something, a tiny bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. I dated casually, never allowing myself to get too serious with anyone. The ability to trust didn't come easily anymore. But slowly, I began to heal. The pain that once felt like a physical presence gradually receded to a dull ache, then to an occasional twinge when something triggered a memory. About a year after they left, I heard through Robert that Dad and Elise had broken up. I felt no satisfaction at the news, just a weary sense of inevitability. Relationships founded on deception rarely last, a lesson they learned too late. Dad moved back to our city a few months later, though he didn't reach out to me immediately. I heard through Robert again that he'd bought a small condo downtown and resumed working part-time at the company. One rainy Sunday afternoon, as I was leaving the grocery store, I literally bumped into him in the parking lot. We both froze, grocery bags in hand, raindrops soaking through our clothes. "Michael," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and tentative hope. "Dad," I nodded, feeling my heart rate accelerate. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. We stood there awkwardly, rain pooling at our feet until he gestured vaguely toward the cafe across the street. "Would you? I mean, if you're not busy." I hesitated, then found myself nodding. "Sure, coffee." The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon and coffee beans. We sat in a corner booth, two steaming mugs between us like a buffer zone. Dad wrapped his hands around his mug as if seeking warmth. "You look good," he said finally. "Healthy." "Thanks." I took a sip of coffee. "Robert mentioned you're back at the company," he nodded. "Just 3 days a week. Keeps me busy." He hesitated, then added, "It helps having a routine again." I understood the subtext. After the breakup with Elise, he'd needed structure, purpose. I could relate to that. "How are you, really?" I asked, surprising myself with the genuine concern in my voice. Dad sighed, running a hand through his hair, more gray now than I remembered. "Truthfully, I've been better. But I've also been worse." He met my eyes directly. "I made a lot of mistakes, Michael. The biggest was hurting you." I looked down at my coffee, unsure how to respond. The anger that had once burned so hot had cooled over time, leaving behind something more complex: sadness, disappointment, and beneath it all, a reluctant understanding of human frailty. "What happened with Elise?" I asked, not sure if I really wanted to know, but needing to hear it anyway. Dad's expression clouded. Reality set in, I suppose. The fantasy of starting over, reinventing ourselves. It didn't match up with the day-to-day. We were different people wanting different things. He shook his head. And the foundation was rotten from the start. We both knew that, deep down. I nodded, thinking of the similar conclusion I'd reached months ago. Does she still live in Boston? As far as I know, we haven't spoken since I moved back. He hesitated, then added, "She asked about you before we ended things. Wanted to know if you were okay." Something twisted in my chest, not pain exactly, but a dull ache of what might have been. "And what did you tell her?" "That I hoped you were, but I didn't know for sure." His eyes grew wet. "I've missed so much of your life this past year." The simple honesty of his statement caught me off guard. For the first time, I truly saw him not as my father or as the man who had betrayed me, but as a flawed human being who had made terrible choices and was living with their consequences. "I've been seeing someone," I said, changing the subject. "Her name is Rachel. She's a graphic designer." Dad's face brightened. "That's wonderful, Michael. I'm happy for you." We talked for another hour, carefully navigating around certain topics but finding unexpected moments of connection. When we finally parted, he asked hesitantly if we could do this again sometime. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Over the following months, we established a new routine: coffee every other Sunday. We didn't discuss Elise again, focusing instead on rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. It wasn't the same as before. We both carried the scars of what had happened, but it was something new, perhaps even something stronger for having been broken and carefully mended. On the anniversary of Mom's death, we visited her grave together for the first time since the betrayal. Standing there, Dad turned to me with tears streaming down his face. "She would be proud of you," he said, "for being stronger than me, for finding a way forward." I put my arm around his shoulders, the first time I'd touched him in nearly 2 years. "She'd be proud of both of us," I said quietly, "for finding our way back to being family." As for Elise, I never saw her again. 3 years after she left, I received a small package in the mail, a book of poetry we had once discussed, with a simple note: "I thought of you when I saw this. I hope life is treating you well." No return address, no signature needed. By then, Rachel and I were engaged. I showed her the book, told her the whole story. She listened without judgment, then asked if I wanted to keep it. "No," I decided, placing it in a donation box. Some stories are better left closed. The betrayal by my girlfriend and my father changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I learned about my capacity for pain, for forgiveness, for rebuilding. I learned that some wounds never heal completely, but they do become part of who you are, not defining you, but informing how you move through the world. Dad and I will never have the relationship we once did. There will always be a before and an after in our family story. But we found a way to write a new chapter, one built on honesty, acceptance, and the complicated love that remains when everything else has been stripped away. As for trust, it comes harder now, but perhaps with more meaning. When I placed the ring on Rachel's finger, I did so with eyes wide open, knowing that love is never a guarantee, but choosing to believe in it anyway. That, I think, is the most profound lesson in all of this: the courage to trust again, even when you know exactly how much there is to lose.